I'll start by explaining who I am and what we're doing here. So I teach drawing fundamentals at an animation school, and over the past, actually getting pretty close to a year now, or less, I don't know. I've been teaching online as well, and these classes are the closest thing I can do for free to actually showing up at one of my classes. I make YouTube videos as well, but those don't really give you the same experience as class time because they have to be edited for content that they have to like hold people's attention. I got to be kind of clickbaity and I got to hook people's attention in the first 3 seconds. So it's not the same experience as like in class where we can take our time. And it's also not interactive. So in these classes, I want these to be interactive. This is your chance to ask questions. And I want it to be a discussion where it's not just me talking to you. It's uh, you talk back and I learn where your struggles are so I can tailor the presentation to make sense to and be relevant to your art journey instead of just me projecting my ideas. Um, so, oh, and I also have a free book. That's a big part of my teaching online that you can download in the link in the description or in the resources channel if you're on the Discord. So, this is the eighth lesson in the Get Wins course that is also available on the website, and there are videos of like the like 10-minute versions of these on YouTube. Today we're going to continue talking about value. Last week we talked about how value was relative and how we can um, communicate the light and dark we see by thinking in terms of relationships. So instead of trying to match an exact brightness that you see to an exact brightness in your drawing, you think about how that brightness, the brightness of that surface relates to the brightness of other surfaces. Um, Before we get into this any further, just a little bit of housekeeping. Like I said, I want this to be a discussion in actual classes. Like in IRL classes, I can see people's faces, and that gives me a visual cue when I should stop talking and let someone else talk. I don't have those here, so if you have something to say, just say it. Don't worry about interrupting me. Don't worry about being rude. I'll stop and we'll address that. If you don't want to talk on the mic or you're on YouTube and you don't have access to the Discord, then you can type it in the chat. I'll read it out loud and we'll go from there. Um, so let me start with you guys, especially if you were here last week. Uh, how has shading been going? Or what are the challenges you face when shading?
uh, value creep, losing track of the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot like I say consider relationships, but there's so many to consider that it's hard to keep track of all of them. You really can't. You can't think about all of them at once. It's just too many. So we need some kind of system to organize that. Which, thank you, that leads perfectly into what I wanted to talk about. Um, so I'll start with what goes wrong. And what I'm talking about is called contrast creep. So, contrast creep happens because we see brightness and darkness relative or relatively. Um, so, if you look at one area of your subject and render that, and then move on to the next area and render that, and move on to the next area and render that. You're only looking at one at a time, and that causes contrast creep. You look at one area at a time, and because you see brightness relatively, the brightest parts of that area that you're looking at will appear very bright, and the darkest parts will appear very dark. And you'll have a tendency to use all of your values in that one area. So in this example, I used all of my value in this one vase, and on its own, it looks fine. But if I put it in context of the still life here, so here's the still life I was looking at, and here's that same vase, but instead of isolation, we see it with the rest of the still life. And I don't think it looks great. What do you guys think? What's wrong with this?
Yeah, it has too much contrast by itself. Doesn't
Yeah.
match the rest of the drawing.
Yeah. So I've used the full range of light and dark in the vase, and now I have nowhere else to go to describe other relationships. So if you look at the vase, I'll zoom in. If you look at the vase compared to the blue cloth behind it, the blue cloth is definitely darker. Even in the darkest shadows of the the vase, the blue cloth is much darker. But because I use the full value range in the vase, there's nowhere else for me to go. There's no way for me to show that it's darker. Um, and in this case, I isolated the contrast creep to the vase. But if you work like this and you're not aware of contrast creep, where you render one area, then you render the next area, then you render the next area without thinking about how they all relate, you'll end up with lots of contrast just kind of sporadically throughout. Like each section that you do will have its own areas of contrast, and there won't be like a unified structure. Instead, where's my other vase? Here's my other vase. So if I look at this vase on its own, where I've used a limited range of value, it looks kind of washed out. Doesn't look as good. But if I put it in context of the still life, it looks much better than the last one. It looks like it fits in place. Um, because I've considered its value relationships to the rest of the subject. So the takeaway here is that we want to find a way to consider all of the value relationships when we're making our value decisions. And the best way I know of to do this is to work in passes and go from big to small. So start with the larger value relationships and then work your way down to the smaller ones within those. And this is, so for example, if I'm studying the still life, I'm going to start with, instead of rendering each area, I'm going to start by kind of figuring out the values as a whole, by simplifying, by blocking in large areas of value. Um, so obviously there's a lot more going on in the fabric here, but I've just simplified it into where the light hits and where it's in shadow. Same thing with the box, same thing with the vase, and I'm thinking about how each of these areas of light and shadow relate across the image. Then I'll add more relationships within those, so I can add some highlights to the cloth and add some darker parts to the shadows. Same thing with the vase, throw in some darker parts. And it starts to look more refined, and then from there, I do the full render. So I'm going from big to small, and then by the time I get to the actual rendering, I already kind of know the value range that I'm working in. So it's just a matter of um, seeing the transitions and the subtleties, um, and like blending and refining those subtleties, those shapes, that kind of thing. But my values are, for the most part, already decided by the time I'm doing the rendering. There's, they're not, it's not fully there. I can um, add some variation, but the range that I'm working in is mostly established. And if I want to go outside that range, I can, but I'll know that I'm going outside that range, and I'll be careful not to create contrast creep by going outside of that range. So I have some other examples here of preparatory sketches that more famous painters would do to figure out their value patterns before they start painting. This is Tiepolo, and this, I don't know what the actual paintings for these were, but you can see that the there's three values here. There's like the really dark shadow, there's the shadow, and then there's the light of the page. And everything falls into that pattern. And sure, it's not refined, it's not finished, but it gives you enough to establish the overall pattern, and then from here you could refine it. If this is working, then the refinement will build on it. If this isn't working, then the refinement usually is not going to help. This one is from Bouguereau, and you can see that it's simplified into large areas of the same value. So when he does the painting, he understands where to balance the overall values, and then he can refine within those areas of value. Um, so that's it as far as theory goes. It's a pretty simple concept, but putting it into practice is what really makes this work. So I'll shut up for a second and give you guys a chance to add your thoughts or questions.
I don't know, honestly. Like, yeah, it's as always, it comes to practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because also, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't follow exactly like your instructions, and I don't draw much from life.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually do more from imagination, or like I take some references and so on. So it's harder to do um, like the passes as
Mm-hmm.
you recommend. Because from imagination, I'm thinking out this object or this setting or whatever, and I'm focusing on that until I'm finished, and then I go to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, something to keep in mind that it's going to help for sure.
Yeah, like it's definitely harder to work from imagination than from life, because you have a lot more that you have to think about. Like you have all of the things you have to think about when drawing from life, but then you add on top of it that you have to invent the subject that you're drawing. But the the actual drawing of it, once you have it invented in your mind, is, and I know it's not as simple as invent it in your mind then put it on the canvas, but the
Yeah.
actual, like, making the marks that define what the thing is pretty much the same skills. Any tips in identifying how local values should look in black and white? For example, if red should be darker than blue, etc. Yeah. So this is something I have I talked about in my color theory lecture like a month or so ago, actually probably a couple months ago at this point, and it's in my book as well. If you give me a second, I can pull up that page. light. There we go. So colors do have their own value ranges themselves. So when colors are chromatic, which is another word for saturation, I mean, technically there is a distinction, but it's too technical for me to care about. Then they're going to have different values. So if I add a grayscale filter on top of the visible spectrum here, you can see where blue is darkest and yellow is the lightest, and red and green are somewhere in the middle. Red's a little bit darker, green's a little bit lighter, and cyan is lighter than blue and or green and red. Um, so that's something to consider. For what I'm talking about now, I want to isolate this to thinking about um, surfaces or objects that have a single surface color. Just to simplify this process, if if you want to add local values and local colors, the way I would think about this as far as a process standpoint is that I would kind of repeat this process for each local value. Like I would find the local value. Actually, I like I did this for the still life here. Like I had a range of local values for the blue, a range of local values for the green, and a range of local values for the white. And then I would do the same process that I'm doing here, but within each of them would be within that range. But there's no exact way to do this. Like when you're working with value, you're translating the light and dark you see into your image, and there's no way it's correct. There's no exact correct way to do it. It's just whether you find those relationships convincing and whether you find them appealing, whether or not they look good, whether or not they look right, that kind of thing. Um, does that answer your question? While you're typing, I'm going to talk. So let's talk about how to put this into practice. So I have two exercises for you for this lesson. They are, yes, I will look more into the book. Cool, thank you. They are the 3-value study and the 5-value study. And they are exactly what they sound like. So in the 3-value study, you render your object using only 3 values. You don't blend, you just keep those 3 values. And this will help you think about the overall picture first. And keep in mind that one of your values is the blank page. I find it helps to have your 3 values laid out ahead of time so you know what you're going for. And one of your 3 values should separate the object from the background. And one of you, actually, no, I'll do this kind of dark. One of your 3 values is the background, so I'm going to actually do this on a brighter background, so I don't have to contrast quite as much. So one of your values separates the subject from the background, and the other one separates the light and shadow of your subject. So I'm going to think about these big shapes and just kind of simplify my subject into those shapes of essentially two values, because the one value is the value of the page, the background. So you could do all of one value and then all of another value. You could switch between them. It's really up to you. Um, I should also say that I'm working from a photo for this demo because I know I say this every time, but for those of you who don't come to all of these, it's important. Um, I'm working from a photograph so you can see what I'm doing, but when you do this exercise, it's important to do it from life. And I explain why working from life and working from photos are different in the second lesson of the course. But the TLDR is that when you're working from photos, you can copy the lines and shapes that you see. Whereas when you're working from life, you have to invent those shapes. You have to interpret your three-dimensional visual experience into the abstractions that make up a drawing: lines, shapes, values, etc. So you can see that the value I'm using for the eye sockets is way brighter, but I have to simplify it either to light or shadow. So it's we're going to have inaccuracies like this. Um, because the point of this exercise is to simplify.
One good question, because now that I see you use the eyedropper to pick up the color, I use brushes that have like some transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm already blocking out the a piece that I'm drawing, I'm already having some transition from one to the other, just because of the transparency of the brush.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I try to keep, like you have on the top now, right? Like the three main values or whatever, and work with them. Or sometimes I just keep picking the value that feels right because it's a run or because it mixed the two brush strokes with different values and whatnot. And I don't know which one is going to help me more keep track. Right? Because one is, oh, look, this one, I don't know, accidentally I make a value mixing two. I say, oh, this looks good. Then I pick this one, and I do some more passes and whatnot with it. Or should I try to stick up with more limited amount of values until till the end when I'm like polishing it?
That's really up to you. Um, like
Mhm.
I'm explaining this stuff as teaching tools, really. Like I don't when I'm working, I don't work in value all that often, but when I do, it's more the way you described, where I'm kind of like blending as I go a little bit. Even though I do have like an overall idea of where I want my values to be at the end. I don't do like these stages. Except I probably would have figured out the like if it's something I'm going to spend a lot of time on, I might have figured out if it's from imagination, I probably would have figured out the larger value patterns in a thumbnail stage. Um, because that's really important to the composition.
Yeah.
So the reason I teach it this way with these clear steps is because it helps people get a result that kind of like drives home how to think about value relationships, not because it's like the correct way to draw. And that's going to be true of all of the exercises I do. They're all the exercises that I teach, all of this stuff. I think of it kind of like training wheels, where the idea is to get you experience in doing things in a way that works. So you have experience of like knowing where or when things will work well. But once you're used to it, you don't need to follow processes anymore because
Yeah.
like you know what the end result is supposed to be and you have an idea of how to get there. You can experiment, you can take different paths. Like if you're in a city you've never been before, um, and you need to know how to get somewhere, somebody's going to give you directions where like turn here, then turn here at this point, and probably the better idea. It's probably a good idea to follow them. There might be a faster way, but your chances that you're going to find it without knowing the city, they're not
Yeah.
great. Whereas if it's a city you've lived in your whole life and you have a good sense of direction, you don't look up on the map how to get places. You just go there. You know where you're going to end up, and you have an idea of what the paths look like to get there. So you can figure it out as you go.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So this is really it for the two value study. It kind of looks like the skull. I didn't measure proportion or anything, so my proportions could have ended up kind of wonky. That's okay. Um, we're not we're isolating one thing at a time, so the other things can end up a little off, but that's fine. I could refine the shapes and the teeth a bit more, but the way to evaluate your success in a two value study or sorry, three value study is just to think of it like it looks overall like the light and shadow that you see, that it's recognizable, um, in its simplified form. The exact placement of the transitions, especially when it's more gradual, eh, it's interpretation. It's not super important to be exact. There really isn't an exact answer anyway. And I think this one's pretty good. Um, One thing that helps is to like get really far away from your piece. If it's digital, you can just zoom out, um, and compare that way. Or um, another way is to squint your eyes, especially when you're working from life where you can't, like you can walk to the other side of the room, but it's not going to change that much unless you live in a very big room. Um, so you can squint your eyes, and that kind of like reduces the detail. Kind of like see through your eyelashes and eyelids a little bit to, or you could unfocus your eyes a little bit too if you know how to do that. Just let them unfocus. Sometimes it's tricky to do that, um, but just ways to reduce how much detail you see to compare. So that's three value, and I can go right from three value to five value because it's just adding two more values. And those two more values are going to be a darker version of the value of the light and a darker version of the shadow. And the reason I always try to go darker is because I learned to do this with traditional materials, with traditional media, excuse me, where you can't, or I mean, you can make things brighter. Like you can start dark and make things brighter with an eraser, but you have a lot less control versus when you're drawing digitally or with paint, you can add light on top of dark. Um, but if you're doing this with like graphite or charcoal or Conte or something, like how I learned to do it, it's really much easier to go darker than it is lighter. So my processes always involve going darker. So instead of adding highlights, I add the darker color. Um, and same thing in the shadow. And I keep that in mind when I'm picking my initial colors. Like that side is really dark, but I had made it a little bit less dark knowing that I'm going to make it darker again. And then once again, this is kind of interpretation because you are simplifying. Sometimes I also decide my values not just based on what I see, but based on how I can define forms. Like this little shape here separates the mouth from the cheek. There's an overlap here, even though the values aren't that different. So I wanted to include that overlap. Now I'll add the darker shadows. Yeah, that's the five value study. Good morning. I tried to go fast in my drawing. It just didn't work. I guess I can't skip nature. Not entirely sure what that means. But yeah, going fast is speed comes with experience. Trying to go fast right away is probably not going to work. Or I shouldn't say not going to work, but it comes with downsides. Um, so yeah, this is 5 value, and it doesn't look perfect, but it does look kind of like the skull. I think it gets me in the ballpark, and you can see that from here. I would, if I was rendering, I would have a pretty good idea of what value ranges I need to be in, and
Mhm.
I could polish this to make it look much more natural. Um, I mean, sure, the I would if I was like actually doing this, I'd probably have the eye sockets be a more middle value, that kind of thing. But um, this will it's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to give you practice at planning your values, and you evaluate the 5 value study the same way that you would evaluate the 3 value study. Just how clearly does your light and dark read? And yeah, just practice grouping values, practicing um, seeing things in the more simplified way instead of trying to render everything at once.
Okay, I have a very specific question.
Of course.
For things, for example, imagine that the skull has like toothpicks on the side, right? So things that are very, very thin
Mm-hmm.
are going to have like this very thin shadow and a very thin highlight.
Um, I
How, right?
sorry.
And
Go ahead.
there's a bunch of them. Well, no, yeah, basically that, right? It's just a bunch of them. So like to simplify it enough, but still keep it because, for example, for the teeth, right? Yeah, they are simplified,
Mm-hmm.
but you have the general shape and you understand that it's teeth because it's just
Right.
how would you do something that it's like a very fine, very small detail?
So I mean, without seeing what you're talking about, it's hard to give you an exact strategy. But we
Let
did
me see
talk.
if I can find it.
We did talk about texture a few weeks ago. I think. I
Yeah.
think I did a texture lecture. Yeah. No, I remember that now. And there's also a section in the book that covers texture. So that's how I would handle it. I would think about if you don't want
Mhm.
to render every toothpick, which you probably don't, I would think about them in terms of texture and use
Yeah.
some shadows and some contours to represent the majority of the ones that you don't want to draw. Uh, can you
Yeah. Finished
share?
talking with them.
Um, yeah, so something like that. I would simplify it for sure. Can you share and reference your drawing here so maybe we can do this exercise later ourselves and compare? I'm going to post this. I mean, I could put the image on the Discord channel as well. And this recording um, will be available on the Discord in the class recording section, so you can compare that way. Um, and this is also covered in the course. So there's a video of me doing the same exercise in the course. Lesson 8 has that. But what I wouldn't want you to, I don't think the best way to learn, I should put it that way, is to try to copy what I did here. Um, because you could know nothing about what I'm saying and just copy the shapes that I made, and that's not really going to help you get where uh, get the ideas that I'm trying to help you get to. To to do this exercise yourself, it would be much better if you got an object and lit it with a single light source and did this exercise. So you're the one translating the shapes. You're the one simplifying into two values or into three values and then five values instead of copying what I did. Um, which, even though you didn't ask that specifically, I'm glad you asked because that's something I should have mentioned for the exercise. It works better if you use a subject that is all the same color, so you don't also have to struggle with local color while you're doing this. And you want to create a lighting setup where it's being lit by one light source. That just makes it easier because then the shadow and the light are clearly separated. I have an example of a setup if you give me a second to find it. So yeah, this isn't what I did for exactly for this shot, but it's the same idea. So I have the one light source and the subject. Um, so it's all and the subject is all the same color. So where is in light and where is in shadow is very clearly defined, which makes it easier. I just want to compare what you, for example, interpret as light and dark, and what I did different, not copy, of course. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. And like I said, I'll post this example on on Discord, and these exercises are in the book as well. Three value and five value. This is a more polished version because it's for the finished product, not something I just did on a stream in half an hour. So yeah, that's what I have today as far as stuff that I wanted to cover. Next week, we're doing lesson 9, which is the second to last lesson, and then we're gonna get into process to start to combine. Let me say that less weirdly. We're gonna combine all the stuff we've learned throughout this course into a single process or a couple processes. Mike is muted.
No, no, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay. Um, cool. Maybe it's not coming through on YouTube. That would be.
Oh, no, I think I hear you. Wait, let me see.
Yeah, I don't. Okay. I mean, whatever. This is the setup I usually use. So if
I can
it's.
hear you perfectly on YouTube too.
Okay, cool. Thanks for checking. Um, where was I? Where was I going with this? Yeah. So next week is going to learn some processes to combine all the stuff, all the sub skills that we've learned throughout this course. So like this is a sub skill to think about value and brightness in terms of like simplifying it and blocking it in. Um, Thinking about value in terms of relationships was a sub skill last week. The visual measurement, thinking about how to describe form with lines, that kind of thing. Those YouTube is fine. Thank you. Those are all sub skills, and next week we're going to combine them into a step by step process. So you use one skill, then use the next skill, then use the next skill after that to produce a more finished drawing. We're getting close to the end of this course, and then these classes will just be uh, just random one-offs again. I shouldn't say random; that makes them sound kind of trivial, but they'll be one-offs of various subjects that don't relate. Um, Before I do my final pitch and then sign off, does anybody have anything they'd want to add or questions?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Once again,
Thank you very much.
we do these every week. Usually they are at on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is UTC -8. Next week I have to move it to Thursday because I have like paying work that I have to do during that time that I can't do at any other time. But usually they're going to be Wednesdays. Next week Thursday, every other week Wednesday. Um, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to be on mic the next time we do these, then there is a link to join the Discord where I also stream these, and you can talk instead of just type. And even if you don't want to join in on the classes live on Discord, it's definitely worth joining as well because we have a really good community here. People are putting in the work to get better, and it helps to have a community of other people doing it because it helps be motivated, and you see what other people are doing that's working, makes you want to do the same thing. So I definitely recommend joining the community. We're all very positive. We'll give you feedback if you ask. We'll hype everybody up. Nobody's mean. Nobody says mean things about your work, and if they do, they're out. Um, so I also have the book, like I've been mentioning, and I pulled it up. That's available on my website from the link below. That's totally free. Um, there is a course, which is what this lesson is from, that's also available on the website. And the purpose of the course is to cover the first chapter of the book, or at least most of the first chapter of the book, in a more structured approach, telling you like exactly what to study and when, which is not something I wanted to do in the book. I wanted it to be more descriptive and less prescriptive. Um, so the course is like gives you a way to work through it, and it introduces study methods that will really help. If you aren't familiar with studying, you're not in the regular practice, going through this course will get you in that regular practice and show you that it works. And then you can take that practice that you learned in the course and apply it to other subjects, including in the book. Just keep going on to the next chapter and do the exercises, have the schedule, that kind of thing. And lastly, the best thing I have to offer for if you want to improve your art as fast as you can is to sign up for mentorship, where I'll work with you one on one and cater everything to your goals and your skill level, give you personalized feedback on your work, make sure that you're getting better and that you're understanding what you need to do. And that's very motivating as well because you're more committed and you don't want to let me down as well. So you'll be more likely to be accountable as well. Um, Once again, thanks everybody for coming, and hopefully I will see you in the lesson next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you very much for the lesson. Goodbye.
Thank you. About